We've been going through a series called What If I Fly? And I want to do an audit of the congregation that is here today. Let me ask you, okay? If you're in this service today and you work or you're passionate or you're trained in anything that is related with the media, maybe you're a journalist, you're a news anchor, you're a host in a radio station, you're a producer, you are a creative, you are a storyteller, or you work in a PR firm somewhere, please stand up. If you work in any of those fields that I've mentioned, you are in a media-related field, please stand up. Don't worry. Don't worry. Awesome. Anybody who works in the media, please stand up. Awesome. If you're in the congregation today and you are an artist, you are a musician, you sing, you write, you dance, you are a designer or drawer. You know, you draw. If there's anybody like that, you are good in drawing. That's your talent. That's your gift. Please stand up. Hey. Awesome. Yeah, we're getting there. Don't worry. We are getting to you. If you're here today and you're in this field that has just come, it's recent. It's called digital. You're in the digital space. You're a digital content developer, or you're a social media practitioner. Anyone like that, you put companies out on social media and grow their platform there and their marketing there. Please stand up. Anyone like that? Okay, one. Hey, downtown, look at those guys. Look at those. Well, the rest of you, what do you do? But let's continue. If you're here today and you are a WhatsApp admin, please stand up. You started a group on WhatsApp. Please stand up. Hey, come on. We are getting there. If you're here and you have a platform on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and you have more than 100 followers, please stand up. Okay, more than 100 followers, you have an account. Okay, clap. Let's clap for ourselves. Let's clap. For those of you who are standing, this sermon is for you. And I want to speak to you today. But if you're seated, I want to speak to you too because you read a newspaper. If you ever, since you were born, you've ever read a newspaper, please stand up. If you've ever listened to a radio station, please stand up. So all I'm trying to say is that this sermon today is for all of us. And we want to talk about media and the arts. You may all have your seats. Great. You're laughing because of WhatsApp admins. I think if you're a WhatsApp admin, by the way, Safaricom is hiring a CEO and you should apply. Let me tell you why. They're looking for somebody who can grow the company. You grew that group from 0 to how many people are there today? You can tell them how you've migrated your group from WhatsApp to Telegram because you exceeded the number of people in the group. If, they're like, we need somebody who can sort out conflicts. How many people do you side chat with from that group? So if you're a WhatsApp admin, I celebrate you. And you should really believe in yourself that you have a platform of what you're doing. Media and the arts. And I want to say to us from the very start that if we ever are going to talk about influencing society, if we are ever going to talk about being people of influence, there is no place that is crucial, there is no place that we must think about influencing like media and the arts. We cannot talk about influence conclusively if we can't think about how we can penetrate media and the arts. We cannot talk about influence unless we talk about how we can set the agenda in media and the arts. And I'm not coming here today to talk to us about opening Christian radio stations. Those are great, but they're for Christians. Those are for Christians. We are talking about getting into mainstream media. We are talking about shaping the narrative of the land. We're talking about influencing how people think. And if you want to see the power that is there in media and the arts, allow me to take you to the Bible. There's a guy who was a famous leader in the Bible. And one day, he wanted a story covered, okay? And so he collected some of the most amazing and the best investigative journalists the land had. And he got 12 of them. He got one from KTN, you can say your name. He got one from Citizen, you can nominate a person. He got one from NTV, your favorite one there as well. Pull them in. And he got a couple of influencers. He put them together and he said, I need a story covered. And I need you guys to go to a place and come back with a report for me. He gave them a brief. And he set them out with crew, and they went with their cameras, and they went with their notebooks, and they went to cover a story in the land that was there back in the day. 40 days later, everything in the Bible seems to happen after 40 days. 40 days later, they came back with a report. Out of the 12 journalists that this guy sent out, 10 came back with a negative report, and 2 came back with a positive report. They both had amazing, amazing facts, and the facts were the same. But 10 of them landed on a different conclusion. 2 of them landed on a different conclusion. So ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take you to where this story is happening in the book of Numbers, chapter 13. And we're going to read verse 27 and verse 30, just to show us that the thing that I'm trying to say is, if we are going to influence this nation, if we are thinking of influencing our continent, there is nothing and there is no place better to do it than through the media and the arts. Numbers chapter 13, verse 27 to 30. This is what the Bible says. It says this. It says, they presented themselves. Wait, I'm reading from a different version. We went to the land to which you sent us. So these reporters have come back, and they've come back with this report, and they're saying, we went to the land to which you sent us. And oh, does it flow with milk and honey? Just look at this fruit. They even carried fruit from the land to show this guy, and they were like, hey, Moses, we even came with fruit for you to see. The only thing is that the people who live there are fierce. Their cities are huge and well fortified. Worse yet, we saw the descendants of the giant Anak. We saw the descendants of the giant Anak. Amalekites are spread out in the Negev. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites hold the hill country. And the Canaanites are established on the Mediterranean Sea and along the Jordan. And then they continued to say this. Caleb interrupted, called for silence before Moses and said, let's go up and take the land now. We can do it. That's the guy who came back with a different narrative. He said, we can do it. And then the rest continued and said this. They said, but the others said, we can't attack those people. They are way stronger than we are. They spread scary rumors among the people of Israel and said, we scouted out the land from one end to the other. It's a land that swallows people whole. Everybody we saw was huge. Why? We even saw the Nephilim giants, and alongside them we felt like grasshoppers, and they looked down on us as if we were grasshoppers. Here's the thing that this story brings out to us. It's not even our main text today, but I want to use this story to show us something here that is powerful. That in the way that we are seated here today, in our understanding of the media and the arts, this story demonstrates one thing. It demonstrates to us that Moses sent out 12 people, and they went to the land, and they observed the land. And when they looked at the land, they both saw the same things. They saw the same facts. The facts were the same. There were giants in that land. The people of the land were fierce, and their walls were fortified. But 10 of them arrived to one conclusion, and they said, we felt and looked like grasshoppers before their sight. And then 2 of them, Caleb and Joshua, looked at Moses and said, even though the facts are true, we can still do what God has called us to do. We can conquer the land. What I'm trying to say to us today is, even in the land that we live in today, there are 2 narratives that are there in this land of ours. There's the narrative that the facts are the same. If we are going to talk about corruption, the facts are the same. If we are going to talk about any single issue in this land, the facts are the same. We are going to land on the same issues and the same facts. But the question that I want to ask you this morning is, what will your conclusion be? Even though the facts are the same. What you choose at the end of the day is the conclusion. The reality can be as painted as it is, but what will your conclusion be as you're seated here today? Whatever issue people choose to discuss in our land today, whether it's politics, the economy, corruption, whatever it is, what do your facts lead you to? I have a niece. Her name is Jamie. Jamie is now 21 years old. She's in college. But when she was young, I was babysitting her. And Jamie loved playing. And she loved playing with me. I was the most playful uncle back in the day, trust me. I carried her. I threw her up and down when her mother was not there. And we did all sorts of things, playing with Jamie. But one day, Jamie discovered a game. This was her first interaction with balloons, okay? And Jamie discovered that every time she came with a balloon, she saw us in the process of, just like blowing balloons. I think there was a birthday party. And so she was just there, she was mesmerized that these things come out of a pack and then you blow them and they become big and you hang them. But one day, and in the process of doing that, I held a balloon to her, okay? And then before tying the balloon, I kind of released it. And you know what that does, yeah? The balloon just like hops around, makes all this rumble, nini, hops, and then it lands. And Jamie was excited. From that day on, that became a game, and the game was called Balloon. So she'd bring the balloon to me and she'd say, blow, I blow. Then I give her, with her tiny hands, she'd hold the tiny thing like this, and then run to the end of this living room, and then release it from there, and follow it as it made its way and landed, and brought it back to me and said, blow. At the end of the day, she had fun and I had painful cheeks. But what I'm trying to tell us today is this, that in our lives today, what the power that the media has today is that you can be in a place like this. You can hear the most life-changing sermon ever in your life. You can come to a place like, you can even go for the Fearless Summit 3 days in, and you feel pumped, and you feel like God is calling you to change the world. God is calling you to set up an enterprise. God is believing in you. He has chosen you. You are amazing. God has your back. And then you step out and read one story, and it deflates you like that balloon that Jamie was holding. This is the power that the media has in our lives. You can read one thing that discourages you completely. Let me check with you. How many of us today have had our view of marriage changed because of what we listen to on our way to work in the morning? I won't say which station. We've become so suspicious. You're dating an amazing girl. She loves you. She's so much in love with you. She switches off her phone for 5 minutes and you're like, hey, there has to be someone else. It is the power of a narrative that has been changed for us. This is the power that the media has on us. It is so powerful that today you and I are at the point, and I don't know how many of us are like me, who were like, Yani, Kitambo, the order of the day was that when you get home, immediately you get home, you do everything so that by 9 p.m. you assemble yourself and watch news. How many here today have confessed that they don't watch news in their homes? Why? Because 3 items into the news, you're discouraged. You just are aware of people killing each other and doing such interesting things. You don't know how much money has been stolen. There's fake gold. And you're just like, let me just silo myself away from the discouragement. It's the power of the narrative. And this is what we are seeing here. And the Bible tells us so clearly that when these guys came back with the news that they came with, Numbers chapter 13, verse 31, they spread the news. And the Bible says that they spread scary rumors among the people. And the people were terrified. And the people that God had sent out to go and conquer lands were now in a place where they were like, we don't even know what God has called us to do. This is what the media and the arts has the power to do. And I want to move us from there and move us to a place of seeing then, so what? Then so what? What then do we do? How can we shape the narrative? If you're holding your phone today and you have people who follow you, you are an influencer. If you're holding your phone today And you have places where, your content is waited for. Maybe you do podcasts. If you're here today and maybe you are a journalist, there are articles that we are waiting for you to write in the course of this week. If you're seated here today and you're a creative thinker, if you're seated here today and you're a producer, you script write, you're the one who puts together the shows that we watch in our land, what then do you do? If you're here today and you have any sort of audience or platform that God has given you, what do you do with that platform? And in the course of this month, we've been tracking along and following the story of an amazing man of God. His name is Nehemiah. My dad is called Nehemiah, so I'm so amazed and happy to be preaching from his book today. And we've been following the story of Nehemiah, a guy that God called and a guy who believes that believed in something and said he was going to construct a wall. And in chapter 1 of Nehemiah, we meet him. He's cried. I don't know who cries about walls. You've never walked in town and seen a wall and you're like, oh my God, I'm just, so moved. But he cries about a wall. And then he assembles himself, and the Bible says that for 4 months he prays about this burden that God gives him. Then Nehemiah assembles himself and heads out 1,365 kilometers from the place where he was in a palace to the place where this wall was devastated. Mind you, this wall had lay in ruins for 150 years. He risks his life and risks his career. His job was he was the cupbearer to the king. He was so trusted to the king, and the history books say that some of the king's cupbearers held what was the signet ring, the seal that the king had. It was like having the president's M-Pesa PIN number. And you can send money to South Sudan. This is who Nehemiah was. And we meet him in a place where he's tense about the situation. He's like, I was cupbearer to the king. He had to live all this life and journey 1,365 kilometers away from the palace, away from the comfort of the palace to reconstruct the walls. And he arrives there. He comes with all this, timber. He has all these permits. From the king and from all the other kings that he needed permits from. And he psychs up the people and he's like, guys, we are going to build a wall. Everybody's like, yeah, let's rebuild the wall. And the people start rebuilding the wall. And then in Nehemiah chapter 4, something happens. One day Nehemiah wakes up. It's been a couple of days since they started reconstructing this wall. But one day Nehemiah wakes up and he wakes up and does what each one of us does. When you wake up, you reach out to your phone. So Nehemiah wakes up and he reaches out to his phone. Something tells me Nehemiah is not an iPhone guy. He sounds like a guy for Android phones. So he reaches out to his Oppo. If you have an Oppo, it's okay. I'm not opposing your choice of phone. But he reaches out to his phone and he checks his status, And I'm sure that back in the day, as it were today, some of the builders would wake up and start taking selfies. Hashtag building the wall. Hashtag we are here. Hashtag bring the stones. Hashtag where are you? And the reconstructing is going on. Guys are excited about it. And then there's these two influencers that lived in this land. Their names are names we've never met before. One was called Sanballat. Have you ever met anyone called Sanballat? And the other guy was called Tobias. Tobias you might have met. So Sanballat and Tobias had woken up earlier than Nehemiah, and this is the status that they posted on Twitter. This is what they said. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 2 and verse 3. So Sanballat said this. It says, when Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he exploded in anger, vilifying the Jews. In the company of his Samaritan cronies and military, he let loose. And verse 2 says this. This is what he writes. What are these miserable Jews doing? Do they think they can get everything back to normal overnight? The status caught fire and people were posting and retweeting it. And then another guy caught it, his Sanballat's friend, his name is Tobias. And Tobias wrote this. He said, that's right. What do they think they're building? Why? In fact, Sanballat Tobias is harsher. Listen to what it says. Why? If a fox climbed that wall, it would fall to pieces under his weight. These guys are talking about the thing that Nehemiah had given his life to come and do. He was sending updates back home. He's saying, I'm building a wall. And the guys here are responding by saying, my guy, this thing you're doing, if a fox leant on it, it would come tumbling down. This is what narrative Nehemiah woke up to that morning. And things continued. As the day was going on, as the rebuilding was going on, this whole thing was trending. Hashtag Fox Walls was trending. Everybody was talking about the Fox Walls. And guess who caught it? Now it moved from just being about Sanballat and Tobias. It's like the way things here happen. One person starts like a thing, and then now it stops being about that person and it spread. Let's see what other influencers have caught this story. By the time we are landing in verse 10 of Nehemiah chapter 4, this is what has happened. It goes on to say this. Verse 7 says, when Sanballat and Tobiah, and then these other guys checked in, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the repairs were of Jerusalem. Basically, from Sanballat and Tobias, now we have Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites. And by the time we land in verse 10 of Nehemiah chapter 4, this is what the Bible says. It says, but meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. I need you to realize who is talking here, because these are not just any other people. If you read your Bible well, you know that the tribe of Judah was known as the tribe of praise. This was the tribe that spread the praise. This was the tribe that went before the people of Israel to bring praise to God. And the same people who used to bring praise to God are now the people who are saying, guys, the laborers are tired and their strength is wearing off. The news had spread so far in that the same people that should have brought encouragement, the same people that should have brought good vibes only, we're not even chilling at home and saying, guys, there's more rubble than wall. What are we even trying to do? I do have a feeling this is exactly where we are at as a country. We are at a place where sometimes it's difficult to spread good news in this country. We're at a place where sometimes we have seen so many things happen, and I don't want to go through the pile of things that have happened, but we are at a place where discouragement rose in this country. Back in the day, it used to be easy to send children to school and to college, but now because of what we know about what goes on in college, because of the narrative that has been shaped there, the parents that we deal with and the parents that I deal with, are like, can this college even come? Can we homeschool college kids now? This is the power of the narrative in the land, my friends. The power of the narrative is such that today, if you wake up and say, hey, I'm going to set up a business, people are going to reality check you and take you through. Do you know, we've been 2 years after the election. We are like 3 years before another election. What kind of a business? You know, can you wait until, I don't even know, should we have 10-year voting periods now? This is the power of what a narrative does to you and to I. That the same people that should have been the tribe of praise, cheering on God's people, are now the people who are saying that we have more rubble than wall. What did Nehemiah do? The first thing that Nehemiah did is this. While all this is going on, Nehemiah chose to do something so amazing that we find in Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 14. People are discouraged. Nobody wants to go back to rebuild the wall. So in Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 14, he assembles the people. And listen to what he tells them. He tells them this. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. The first thing that Nehemiah did in the midst of this narrative that was penetrating everywhere is that he brought people together and reminded them of who God is. And the thing here is that there's no way, there's absolutely no way that he was going to just stand before people and say, guys, look at me, I'm Nehemiah. First of all, he was just cupbearer to the king. Nobody knew him. There's no way. The walls that he was trying to reconstruct had been constructed by David before him. So there's no credibility that he had other than the fact that he had come with a big dream to build a wall. The only credibility that Nehemiah had is that he had come with the name of the Lord our God. And the first thing that I want to say to us concerning this field that is media and the arts, and the first thing that I want to say to us concerning the platforms that we have today and the conversations that we find ourselves in is, are we using our platforms to focus people on who God is? Are we using our platforms to remind people that God is great? Because it's only when you remind people that God is great that they stop feeling like grasshoppers in the midst of challenges and remember that they are children of the Most High God. Are we using our platforms to focus people on God? But he doesn't stop there. He continues on, and the second thing that he does is this. In Nehemiah chapter 4, if you read verse 6, verse 15, and verse 21, all of them say and have this thing in common. Verse 6 says this: so we rebuilt the wall till of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. Verse 15 says this. It says, when our enemies learned that we knew all about their plan and that God had frustrated it, and we went back to the wall and went back to work. And verse 21 says, we kept working. And so we kept working from the first light until the stars came out, half of us holding lances, half of us constructing the wall. And the thing that you see in this, the trend that you see in this, is that Nehemiah consistently reminded people of what God had called them to do. Nehemiah didn't just focus people on God and say, okay, fine, let's just focus on God and remain there. He picked the people and told them, even in the midst of discouragement, let's go back and rebuild the wall. He reminded people of what God had called them to do. Fine, discouragement has set in our land. Fine, things are difficult in our land. Fine, many things are not going the way they should be. But can we use our platforms to remind people of what God has called them to do? Can we use our platforms to refocus people's energy on the purpose and the goal that God has given them in their lives? When you meet college students whose narrative has been defined as a narrative that says, my guy, you're in school, but there are no jobs that you're finishing school to go to, can we remind them that God is greater than the economy that we have here, that is able to carry you through the seasons of life? Could it be that some of us who are seated here today, we don't even need to think about big platforms that God is calling us to, but the platform that is just your family, the WhatsApp group that you have in your family, your siblings who look up to you? Could it be that what God is asking you to do today is to remind them of the purpose that God has called them to? Because we meet many people who are discouraged. We meet many people who have been thrown to the realities of life and the things that are going on in life. And for as long as we do nothing about this, for as long as we do not remind people of their purpose, as long as we don't remind people to continue working on what God has called them to, regardless of whatever else is going on around them, then what we are going to do is that we are going to let Sanballat and Tobias rule the airwaves that are our society today. Could the platform that God has given you be the place that you need to remind people and to change the narrative for people, to give hope where there is no hope? Where are the stories of marriages that are working? Could we have a story for every story that we hear of things that are happening? Where are the stories of marriages where God is at the center? We are fine that, there are realities that are there, but God reigns at the center to encourage those of us who are looking forward to that institution to say that there is hope, and we are going to move forward because there is hope. In every story that we hear of lives, of young lives that are being wrecked apart because of gambling, and because of waiting on, everybody is gambling, everybody is in a space where they're just, this has become a way of life. So much so that EABL can step out and say, our sales have reduced because of. Where are the stories of people who've made it through genuine hard work, to inspire our young people to believe in themselves and say that I'm going to trust in the process and that eventually God will get me there? Where are those stories? If we let our airways be dominated by stories of people who've made a deal here and another deal there, a corrupt one here and a corrupt one there, we are going to rid our society of the genuine stories of hard work, and that hard work pays, but it pays in time, and that there's a process to be followed. And if that's your story, could it be that there's a platform that God has given you to share it, and to share it strong enough so that we can be able to change the narrative that is on our land? We need to remind people and focus people on what God has called them to do. And the last thing that I need to say is this. It's so amazing that the Bible talks about this. It says in Revelation chapter 12, verse 11, that they overcame. How did people overcome? When the Bible refers to that verse, it says they overcame by the blood of the Lamb, yes, but by the power of their testimony. They overcame by the power of the word that they said. And if we're going to keep quiet, if we put ourselves in a place where we don't share the narrative or push a narrative that changes the narrative that is out there, then we let things fall out too far. And we let the wrong news reign strong in our airwaves. Here's the thing that I need us to know. I need us to realize that at the end of the day, our God is a God who came to change our narratives. Our God is a God who, when we meet him in the Bible, he meets a guy called Abram, and he gives him a name he calls him Abraham. And he refers to him as the father of the nations. Even though this guy's reality was that he was fatherless. Is it fatherless or childless? He was childless. But when God meets him, what's the first thing he does? He changes his name. He gives him a different name. He changes his narrative. He says that I have come, and today I have come so that you can have a different name. When God comes in and an angel steps in on Gideon, it finds Gideon hiding somewhere, threshing wheat, hidden somewhere because of what the Midianites had done in their land, Judges chapter 6. But what does God call Gideon? He doesn't step into Gideon's land and say, hey Gideon, and hide from where you're hiding, for thou stands before you the Lord mighty and great. No, he goes to Gideon and he says, Gideon, mighty warrior. Gideon is hiding. What God is doing when he's calling him mighty warrior is that he's changing what is going on around him. He's calling him by something different. He's changing his narrative. This is what we are called to do. It's not something that is strange. It's something that God already does in the Bible and shows us how to do it, how to push a message of hope in a land that is full of despair. When God meets Jeremiah and he talks to Jeremiah and he says, Jeremiah tells God, I'm only a boy. God changes it and he says, no, you're not only a boy. I've called you. I knew you before I formed you in your womb. When you read Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, all the way to verse 48, we meet Jesus. And Jesus is introducing himself to us. And the phrase that he uses the most is the phrase that says this. He says, you heard it said, but I come to say to you. And in those verses from verse 17 all the way to verse 43, Jesus tackles such key issues. He talks about adultery. He talks about divorce. He talks about hatred. He talked about the things that were happening in the land then. And he says, you had it said this way, but I have come to tell you this. Jesus came to change the narrative for us. And he came in a time when hatred and all these things that are happening in our society today were real in the society back then. But he managed to change it. And the reason you and I have hope today is because he left 12 influencers and he said, guys, me, I've gone. I've gone. One of them left, yes, the group. He left the group. His name is Judas. But the ones who remained there carried a different narrative and changed and brought us a message of hope. And thousands of years later, you and I can be seated in this place. Why? Because there are some guys who refused to keep quiet, even when the whole world was against the narrative that they had. And so media and the arts, if you're seated here today, if you have any sort of platform that God has given you, if you have anything, any talent, any gift that is in this place that we've talked about, even if you're not talented in media and the arts, but you have a platform where you share messages, what we are asking you today is, can we be people who can shape and set the agenda by sending out a totally different narrative from the one that we have today? That where there is despair, can we be the people who rise up and say, we know God. And we know that God transcends over anything and everything that is going on in our land today. It's the power of a changed narrative. And as we finish our service today, allow me to finish this on a very personal note to you and I. Allow me to say that some of us who are seated here today, even I who is preaching to you, I'm here because somebody changed the narrative of my life. I'm here because somebody chose to tell me things that were different from the things that everybody else in society was telling me. I'm here because when realities of life were crashing, and I've shared my story here before, that when the realities of life were crashing in and threatening to take away the thing that God had called me to, somebody stood before me and said, you are going to become what God has called you to be. You are going to believe in God strong enough for you to become who he has called you to be. They used letters. Back in the day, we had letters written to schools. They used letters. They used whatever avenue they had. They wrote letters to me and told me, Frank, you are going to rise up to become who you have been called to be by God. You're going to be great. And in the midst of my own despair and what today we'd call depression and all those things, somebody spoke to me and helped me reshape a different narrative about my life. And that is the power that you have in your hands today. That you and I have the power to build up dreams or to tear down dreams. You and I have the power to wow people out of their dreams or to wow people into their dreams. And what I'm asking you today is, with the power of the platforms that you have, what message, what narrative are you spreading out to the people around you? Are we sources of hope? Are we sources of despair? Because it's either one or the other. Are we focusing people on who God has called them to be? What God has asked them to be? Are we focusing people on the greatness of our God and saying, this is our God? That's the power that we have in our hands today. I pray that God may shape us and may God use us in the field of media and the arts to influence our society for his great name and for his fame. In Jesus' name, thank you.